The galaxy had known peace for 12,000 years. 17 different species traveled between the stars, traded goods and knowledge, and settled their disagreements with words instead of weapons. They called themselves the Galactic Concord, and they believed they had built something eternal. At the heart of the Concord's capital world stood a building with no windows. It was called the Archive of Silence, and it held the most dangerous secrets in the known universe. Inside were records of dead civilizations, sleeping species, and things that should never be disturbed. Every new species that learned to travel faster than light was brought here and shown the warnings. Elder Veth Khan had performed this duty for 300 years. He was old even by the standards of the Sirathi, and his body glowed with soft blue light that grew dimmer when he spoke of dark things. Today, he stood before a delegation from the Velthari Dominion, the youngest species to join the Concord. "You have done well to reach the stars," Veth Khan said. His voice was gentle but serious. "But the universe is older than you know, and it holds many dangers. Some of these dangers are not monsters or natural disasters. Some of them are sleeping civilizations that must never be awakened." The Velthari delegation listened politely. They were tall beings with 4 arms and scales that shifted color with their emotions. Their leader was Commander Urix, a military officer who had pushed his species to develop faster-than-light travel in record time. He was ambitious, clever, and not easily impressed by old stories. Veth Khan led them deeper into the archive. The walls were lined with sealed containers, each one holding information about a different species. Some containers were marked with simple warning symbols. Others had multiple seals and locks, but one container, at the very back of the archive, was different from all the others. It was covered in more warning seals than Urix had ever seen. Red symbols in dozens of languages surrounded it. Chains of pure energy wrapped around its surface, and carved into the container itself were words in the oldest language of the Concord. "Do not open. Do not transmit. Do not approach." "This," Veth Khan said quietly, "is the file on Sol 3, the planet called Terra, the species called humanity." Urix felt his scales shift to a darker color. "What are they?" "They sleep," Veth Khan answered. "They have slept for 12,000 years, since before the Concord existed. The elders who first found them left only one instruction." He paused, and his glow dimmed almost to nothing. "Let them dream." "Why?" asked one of the younger Velthari. Veth Khan was silent for a long moment. "They did not do anything to us. They did something to themselves. They fought a war so terrible that when it ended, they chose to sleep rather than face what they had become. They sealed themselves beneath their oceans and mountains, and turned off their lights. They left warnings in every language they knew, telling the universe to leave them alone." Urix studied the sealed container. "And we have obeyed? For 12,000 years?" "We have," Veth Khan confirmed. "Because the elders understood something important, Commander. Humanity did not lose their war. They won, and the winning was so terrible that they could not bear to stay awake." The delegation returned to their ship that night, and most of them forgot about the strange container in the archive. But Urix did not forget. He could not forget. Because his people were dying, and no one in the Concord seemed able to save them. The hollow had come from the space between galaxies 3 years ago. It was not a species or a fleet or anything that could be understood. It was darkness that moved with purpose. It consumed stars and planets and ships, and nothing the Concord did could stop it. System after system fell silent. Billions of lives vanished without a trace. The Concord's greatest fleets had tried to fight the hollow. They had failed. The Concord's greatest scientists had tried to understand it. They had failed, and now the hollow was moving toward the heart of the galaxy, toward the worlds where the Concord species had been born. Urix's own homeworld was directly in its path. He returned to the Archive of Silence alone, 3 months after his first visit. He told the guards he wanted to study the history of the Concord. They let him in, without suspicion, and when he was alone, He went to the sealed container at the back of the archive. It took him 4 hours to break the locks. The security was old and had not been updated in thousands of years. No one had ever tried to open it before. When the final seal broke, the container opened with a soft hiss, and Urix found himself looking at files that had not been read in 12 millennia. What he found made his scales turn pale white with shock. The files did not describe a dangerous species that had destroyed itself. They described a species that had mastered war in ways the galaxy had never seen. Humans had fought each other for their entire history, constantly improving their weapons and tactics. They had turned conflict into an art form and survival into a science. When they finally reached the stars, they found no enemies worthy of their abilities. So they fought each other one last time, in a war that burned their own world. But they did not die. They rebuilt, they healed, and then they made a choice that Urix could barely understand. They chose to sleep because they were too dangerous to stay awake. The files contained a final note, written by one of the elders who had first made contact with the sleeping humans. It said, "They are not a warning. They are a weapon. The most terrible weapon the universe has ever produced, and they are waiting for something worth waking up for." Urix sat alone in the archive for a long time after reading those words. He thought about his homeworld, and the billions who would die when the Hollow reached it. He thought about the Concord's fleets, burning in the darkness. He thought about the desperate prayers of species who had no hope left. And then he made his decision. He copied the location of Sol 3 to his personal device. He memorized the frequency that the files said should never be transmitted in that system. And he walked out of the archive with the knowledge that would either save the galaxy or doom it forever. The elders had warned them never to wake humanity. But the elders had not seen the Hollow. They had not watched their people die by the billions. They had not felt the despair of knowing that nothing could save them. Urix would wake the humans. Whatever the cost, whatever the consequences, he would wake them, because the alternative was extinction, and he refused to let his people die without trying everything. Even forbidden things, even humanity. The journey to Sol system took 17 days. Urix traveled alone in his personal vessel, telling no one where he was going. He knew that if the Concord discovered his plan, they would stop him. They would call him mad. They would say he was dooming the galaxy to save his own people. Maybe they would be right. But he had to try. Sol system was located in a quiet arm of the galaxy, far from the major trade routes. No Concord vessel had visited it in thousands of years. When Urix's ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, he expected to find a dead system, a tomb orbiting a yellow star. What he found made him stop breathing. Earth was not dead. The planet below him was covered in blue oceans and green land, exactly as the ancient files had described. But it was what surrounded the planet that made Urix's scales turn white with fear. Thousands of satellites drifted in orbit, ancient but not inactive. Their surfaces were covered in weapons that Urix's sensors could not identify. And beneath the oceans, his scanners detected structures so massive that they made the Concord's greatest space stations look like children's toys. The humans had not simply gone to sleep. They had built a fortress and wrapped it around their entire world. Urix sat in his command chair for a long time, staring at the planet below. He had come here to wake a sleeping species. But this did not look like sleep. This looked like waiting. Finally, he made his choice. He activated his communication system and broadcast the signal that the ancient files had forbidden. It was a simple distress call, the universal frequency that all Concord species used when facing extinction. The one frequency that the elders had said must never be transmitted in this system. The signal went out into the void, and then Urix waited. 1 day passed. Nothing happened. The satellites continued their silent orbit. The structures beneath the ocean remained dark. 2 days passed. Urix began to wonder if the humans were truly dead after all. Perhaps 12,000 years was too long even for them. Perhaps he had risked everything for nothing. On the 3rd day, the oceans moved. Urix watched in amazement as something rose from the Pacific Ocean. It was not a building, and not a ship. It was something in between, a structure that seemed to grow and change as it lifted itself from the water. Lights flickered to life across its surface, blue and white and gold. And then a signal reached his ship. The translator systems took several seconds to process the language. It was old, older than anything in the Concorde's databases. But eventually, words appeared on his screen. You used the old signal. That signal means someone is dying. Urix's hands trembled as he transmitted his response. He sent everything. The records of the Hollow. The videos of consumed worlds. The death counts that grew larger every day. He sent the desperate pleas from species facing extinction and the failed battle plans of the Concorde's greatest admirals. He sent his own planet's predicted destruction date. Now only months away, and then he waited again. The response came after 6 hours. 6 hours of silence that felt like 6 years. Show us. 3 days later, a shuttle launched from Earth's surface and approached Urix's ship. He watched it come with a mixture of hope and terror. The ancient files had described humans as small, fragile, unarmored. But the files had also described them as the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. The shuttle docked with his ship, and the airlock cycled open. Urix stood to greet whatever would come through. She was smaller than he expected. A human female, standing barely higher than his chest, with black hair tied behind her head and dark eyes that seemed to look through him rather than at him. She wore a simple gray uniform with no visible weapons or armor. By Velthari standards, she should have been no threat at all. But when she stepped onto his ship, every instinct Urix possessed screamed at him to run. "My name is Commandant Sarah Chen," she said. Her voice was calm and controlled. 12th Fleet, Terran Continuity Government. You have made a formal request for military assistance against an existential threat. She paused and studied him with those dark, patient eyes. We accept. Urix found that his voice had abandoned him. He managed to gesture toward the main viewport, where Earth hung in the darkness. You will help us? Sarah nodded once. We have reviewed your information. The entity you call the Hollow is a genuine threat to all life in this galaxy. This is exactly the kind of situation we preserved ourselves for. She moved past him to study the star charts displayed on his navigation console. How long until it reaches the Concorde's core worlds? 8 months, Urix managed to say. Perhaps less. Then we have work to do. Sarah turned back to face him. I will return to Earth and begin mobilization. You will go to your Concorde and tell them what you have done. They will not be pleased. No, Urix agreed. They will be furious. The elders warned us never to wake you. They said you were too dangerous. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. It might have been amusement, or it might have been something darker. The elders were wise, she said. We are dangerous. More dangerous than you can possibly understand. But the Hollow is worse, and we do not let innocent species die when we can prevent it. She walked back toward her shuttle. Go, Commander. Tell your people that humanity is awake. Tell them help is coming. She paused at the airlock and looked back at him. And tell them to be ready. We have slept for 12,000 years. We are eager. The shuttle detached from his ship and descended back toward Earth. Urix watched it go. And then he watched as lights began to appear across the planet's surface. Cities that had been dark for millennia were waking up. Ships that had waited in silence were powering their engines. An entire civilization was stirring from its long sleep. Urix set his course for the Concorde's capital and pushed his engines to maximum speed. He had done what he came to do. He had woken humanity. Now he had to face the consequences. Behind him, Earth blazed with light. And in orbit, the ancient satellites began to move for the first time in 12,000 years, turning their weapons toward the distant darkness where the Hollow waited. Humanity was awake, and they remembered how to fight. The war against the Hollow continued for 7 months. Battle after battle, system after system. The human fleet pushed the darkness back toward the edge of the galaxy. Species that had prepared for extinction began to hope again. Worlds that had been evacuated were reoccupied. The Galactic Concorde started to believe that they might actually survive. But as the war progressed, strange things began to happen. Sealed archives across conquered space started opening themselves. Security systems that had been locked for 12,000 years suddenly failed. Data that had been classified at the highest levels appeared on public networks. Someone, or something, was revealing secrets that the elders had kept hidden since before the Concord existed. Ambassador Vethkon was the first to understand what was happening. He gathered the fragments of revealed data and pieced them together in his private quarters, his bioluminescent body flickering with growing horror as the truth became clear. The elders had not simply found humanity sleeping. They had been there when humanity chose to sleep. And they had lied about the reason why. 12,000 years ago, there had been no galactic Concord. The species that would later form the Concord had been at war with each other, fighting over territory and resources and ancient grudges. It had been a dark time, an age of death and destruction that made the Hollow seem almost peaceful, and in their desperation, the warring species had done something unthinkable. They had found humanity's homeworld, found the humans sleeping after their own civil war, and they had woken them up. They had begged the humans for help. Just as Urix had done, the humans had agreed. The war that followed lasted 11 days. Not months. Not years. 11 days. The humans had analyzed every species involved, identified every weakness, and exploited them all with terrifying precision. But they did not simply kill. They did something far more effective. They made everyone understand exactly what they were doing to each other. The records were fragmented, but the surviving accounts described human ships projecting images directly into the minds of soldiers and civilians alike. Images of suffering, of children dying, of worlds burning. The humans forced every combatant to see the war from their enemy's perspective, to feel what their victims felt, to understand the full horror of what they had chosen. The fighting stopped almost immediately, not because the humans had won through force, but because no one could continue fighting after seeing what they had truly become. The peace that followed was built on shame and horror. The warring species united into the Concord, swearing never to fight each other again, and they turned to the humans, ready to thank them, ready to offer them leadership of the new alliance. The humans refused. Vethkon found the final record buried in the deepest layer of the archive. It was a message from a human leader, recorded just before humanity returned to sleep. "We accept your gratitude," the human said. She was old, with gray hair and tired eyes. "But we cannot stay among you. What we did to end your war was necessary, but it was not kind. We showed you the truth, and truth can be a weapon more terrible than any bomb." She paused, and her face filled with something that might have been sorrow. "We have looked at ourselves with the same honesty. We have seen what we are capable of, and we are afraid, not of you, but of what we might become if we stay awake. Power corrupts, and we have more power than any species should possess." The message continued, but Vethkon already understood. The humans had not chosen to sleep because they were dangerous to others. They had chosen to sleep because they were dangerous to themselves. They knew that if they remained awake, surrounded by weaker species, they would eventually become tyrants. It was not a possibility. It was a certainty, so they had locked themselves away and left behind only warnings. Vethkon took this information to Commandant Chen. He found her on the bridge of her flagship, coordinating the latest battle against the Hollow. She did not seem surprised when he showed her the recovered records. "You knew," he said. "You knew that we had woken you before." "Of course we knew," Sira replied. "We remember everything, Elder. Our archives are complete. We know exactly what happened 12,000 years ago, and we know exactly what we did. Then why did you come? Why did you help us again, knowing what we had hidden from ourselves?" Sira turned away from her tactical displays and looked at him directly. "Because you were dying," she said simply. "Because the Hollow would have consumed every living thing in this galaxy, including us, eventually. And because..." She paused, searching for words. "Because despite everything, we still want to be good." She walked toward the viewport, where the stars burned cold and distant. "We are not heroes, Elder. We are not saviors. We are a fire that cannot be put out, only contained. But fire can also provide warmth. It can also drive back the darkness." She turned back to face him. "We choose, every moment of every day, to be useful, rather than destructive. That choice is the only thing that separates us from the monsters we could become. And when the Hollow is defeated, Vethkan asked, "What choice will you make then?" "That depends on you," Sira said. "On all of you. The Concord must decide what happens next. Do you want us to stay awake? To protect you from future threats? To guide you with our experience and power?" Her voice hardened slightly. "Or do you want us to sleep again and let you face the universe on your own?" Vethkan's light flickered with uncertainty. "What do you want?" Sira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and tired. "I want to sleep," she admitted. "I want to close my eyes and not wake up until humanity has evolved beyond what we are now. I am tired of being dangerous, Elder. I am tired of watching people look at me with fear. Even when I am helping them," she straightened her shoulders, "but I will do whatever is necessary. That is what we are. That is what we have always been. We will help you survive, and then we will accept whatever you decide." Her eyes met his. "Even if you decide we are too dangerous to exist." Outside the viewport, the human fleet continued its work, pushing the Hollow back toward the void between galaxies. They fought without complaint, died without hesitation, and never once asked for gratitude. They were humanity. They did not know any other way to be. And soon, very soon, the galaxy would have to decide what to do with them. The final battle against the Hollow took place at the edge of the galaxy, in a region of space so distant that the stars themselves grew thin and cold. The human fleet had driven the darkness here over 7 months of constant warfare, pushing it back system by system until there was nowhere left to run. The entity that emerged from the Hollow for this final confrontation was larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. It was a shape made of pure darkness, a thing that existed between the stars and fed on light itself. When it moved, reality trembled. The human fleet did not hesitate. For 3 days, the battle raged. Ships were destroyed by the dozens. Crews died by the thousands. The Concord observers who had come to witness the final engagement could do nothing but watch in horror as the humans threw themselves against an enemy that seemed impossible to kill. But the humans did not retreat. They did not surrender. They adapted with every passing hour, learning from each failure, adjusting their tactics with a speed that no other species could match. When one weapon failed, they created new ones. When one strategy collapsed, they invented another. On the 3rd day, Commandant Sarah Chen led the final assault personally. Her flagship drove directly into the heart of the Hollow, carrying a weapon that her scientists had built specifically for this moment. No one knew exactly what it did. No one except the humans. The explosion that followed was silent, as all explosions in space are. But the light that erupted from the Hollow's core was visible across half the galaxy. For a single moment, a new star burned in the darkness, brighter than anything nature had ever created. When the light faded, the Hollow was gone. Not destroyed entirely, the humans later explained, but wounded so badly that it had retreated to the void between galaxies. It would take thousands of years for it to recover, if it ever did. Humanity had won. The Galactic Concord celebrated for weeks. Species that had prepared for extinction sang songs of gratitude. Monuments were proposed. Holidays were declared. The humans who had saved them all were called heroes, saviors, gods among mortals. The humans did not celebrate. They gathered their dead, more than 40,000 bodies, and carried them back to Earth. They repaired their damaged ships in silence. They waited for the Concord to decide their fate. The Grand Council met on the Concord's capital world, all 17 species represented. The question before them was simple: what should be done with humanity? Some argued that the humans should be given leadership of the Concord. They had proved their worth. They had saved everyone. Surely they deserved to guide the galaxy into a new age of peace and prosperity. Others argued the opposite. They had seen what humanity could do. They had watched crews destroy themselves without hesitation, watched tactics adapt faster than any mind could follow, watched an entire species wage war with a focus that bordered on obsession. The humans were too dangerous to remain awake. They should be asked to sleep again. And this time, the archives should be destroyed entirely. Commander Urix spoke on the final day of debate. He stood before the council, the same place where he had stood when he confessed to waking humanity. And he told them what he had learned. "I woke them because I was desperate," he said. "I did not understand what I was doing. I thought I was unleashing a weapon to save my people. But I was wrong." He paused, and his scales shifted to a deep blue color. "Humanity is not a weapon. They are a mirror. They show us what we could become if we were stronger, faster, more determined. They show us the price of that strength." He looked around the council chamber. "I have watched them fight and die for species they had never met. I have watched them destroy themselves to protect strangers. And I have watched them struggle, every single day, to remain good despite what they are." He lowered his head. "We do not deserve to tell them what to do. We should ask them what they want." Commandant Sira Chen was invited to address the council. She came alone, as she always did, and stood before the assembled representatives of 17 species. "You are afraid of us," she said. Her voice was calm and steady. "You should be. We are everything you fear and everything you need. And we know it better than you do." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that could not hold her gaze. "We will not lead you. We will not rule you. We will not stay awake simply because you fear the dark. That path leads to dependency. If humanity fights all your battles, you will never learn to fight for yourselves. You will remain children forever, hiding behind your parents." She straightened her shoulders. "We will return to sleep. But not all of us. We will leave one ship, the Vigil, at the edge of your space. It will watch for threats. If the Hollow returns, or if something worse appears, the crew will wake us." Her voice softened. "Learn to be strong. Not because we demand it, but because the universe will always produce new horrors. The Hollow was not the first. It will not be the last. You must grow, or you will die. That is the truth of existence." Elder Vethkon rose from his seat, his bioluminescent body glowing with complex emotions. "And if we fail? If we prove too weak?" Sira smiled. It was a human expression, strange and somehow sad. "Then we will wake. We will save you. And we will sleep again. And wait for you to grow." She inclined her head. "That is the burden we chose long ago. Humanity will be your nightmare and your guardian, your warning and your salvation." She turned to leave, then paused. "Commander Urix broke your laws to save his people. He woke something that you had been told never to disturb. He risked everything on a chance. A hope. A desperate prayer." She looked back at the council. "That is very human of him. Perhaps, in time, you will all become a little more human, and then you will not need us at all." The human fleet departed 3 days later. Millions of humans returned to their sleeping cities beneath Earth's oceans and mountains. The lights that had blazed across the planet's surface dimmed and went out, one by one, until Earth was dark again. But at the edge of Sol system, a single ship took its position among the cold stars. The Vigil, crewed by volunteers who had chosen to watch while their people slept. Urix visited them once, a year after the war ended. He found a crew of 50 humans, living in a ship designed for centuries of isolation. They were quiet, patient, and deeply sad. "Do you regret it?" he asked the captain, a young woman with old eyes. "Choosing to stay awake while everyone else sleeps?" She looked out at the stars, toward the distant galaxies where the Hollow had retreated. "Someone has to watch," she said. "Someone has to remember what we are, and what we might become. That is our duty. That is our purpose." She turned to face him. "Go back to your people, Commander. Build your civilizations. Make your mistakes. Learn from them. Grow strong. Grow strong." She smiled, and it was the saddest smile Urix had ever seen. "And if the darkness comes again, we will be here, waiting, hoping we will never be needed." She paused, knowing that, eventually, we will be. The stars turned slowly around the Vigil as the centuries passed. The galactic concord grew and changed. learned and struggled, faced new challenges, and overcame them. Sometimes they looked toward Sol system and wondered about the sleeping giants on the third planet. And somewhere in the darkness, a crew of 50 humans watched the void, patient and vigilant, carrying the weight of their species' terrible gift, waiting, always waiting, for the day when humanity would wake again,